Hi, this is Dr. Bob Fitrakis. You're listening to The Other Side of the News. We'll be talking about the Iowa debacle, the State of the Union, Trump's impeachment and the acquittal, and the prayer breakfast. And there's not a holier man and righteous man in the city than Michael Alwood, managing editor of the Free Press, will be here to discuss these issues.
Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
Blessed to have Michael Alwood in the studio. Some of you may recall in the old days, he used to do the Blue State Diner, my favorite show on the old WVKO.
And I was also producer of Fight Back with Dr. Bob Fitrakis, my favorite show on WVKO. Bob, I got to tell you, I'm feeling a little like Lemony Snicket, having endured a series of unfortunate events, as we all have, all of us. And I'll be a little more serious. I honestly believe that we have just been witness to a series of events that are among the most shameful in this country's history. And I say that because these were all choices people were making to do this. It wasn't an accident. These were choices they made. And the choices they made were bad ones.
And what just popped into my mind, Michael Alwood, is that one of those choices was to give Rush Limbaugh the Medal of Freedom. Now, let's be fair. He didn't use the N-word that much, and when he used it, he put an A on it, okay?
Right.
But he did say that feminism was an attempt for not very good-looking women to be allowed into the mainstream.
And you're talking about a man who has done more to rend this nation into opposing shreds than maybe anybody else in America, and now he's being given the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Highest honor a civilian can get.
And I'll tell you what, since we're jumping right to the State of the Union, I was listening to NPR for most of it, and one of the commentators, I can't remember which one, had likened it to a game show.
Yeah.
More like, and I told this to Veronica, and I said it was more like watching Oprah Winfrey, because you get a car, and you get an education, and you get a Medal of Freedom, and you get to go to space, and you get a star on your shoulder.
And if you're real naughty like Nancy Pelosi, you get snubbed.
Yes. Which brings us to, she's been getting a lot of criticism for her ripping the speech into, but I applauded her for it.
Oh, so did I. Representative Ryan walked out. Others walked out. There was numerous points where he should have been shunned. People should have stood and turned their backs on him. Just outrageous. And this whole notion of the modern State of the Union address really comes out of the last person who really gave a legitimate State of the Union address was probably Jerry Ford. Might have cost him the election. You used to give the State of the Union address to be truthful to the American people on policy.
You're forgetting Jimmy Carter.
Well, Jimmy Carter, yeah. Well, yeah, they thought Jimmy Carter was pretty straightforward. But the guy who began to change this, of course, was Ronald Reagan.
Oh, yeah, the great communicator.
Bringing in the Disney people. And there was some references, it was PR strategy, but the Trump stuff is just kind of evil, nasty, vindictive, divisive.
Oh, and he was only just getting warmed up because we're skipping over some events that are important, but we go straight to today with his so-called victory lap at the National Prayer Breakfast when he gets out and out slimy with his comments, calling his opponents scumbags, among other things. And at a prayer breakfast, he uses the term BS, but doesn't bother to initialize it at a bloody prayer breakfast. And then he shoots at his opponents following a speech that urged the gathering to love and pray for your enemies.
Right. And not only that, he knows virtually nothing about, of course, religion, particularly born-again, right-wing Christians. Remember, he said to Corinthians, right? Nobody who's a born-again Christian, you learn at an early age. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians. He knew nothing about the books of the Bible. Ought to be ashamed, the phony 2 Corinthians. I mean, this guy has been obsessed with making money. The only one he knows is the corporate Jesus.
The corporate Bible.
Yeah, invented, the man nobody knew, invented by corporate America. But he knows very little about the scriptures. And again, I'm not thinking he's a man of deep faith, other than faith in himself, which seems to be overblown.
Well, let's go from his impeachment, or his State of the Union, to the impeachment and what happened, starting with the fact that these senators in good conscience, supposedly, would vote to not allow witnesses or documents in the most important trial in recent memory. To first, not allow any documents or
I hope
witnesses.
you're not one of those liberals, Michael, that's going to argue that there's witnesses at trials. In order to get to the truth, you should have witnesses. Is that your position?
I'm afraid it is.
It's so absurd. You have a trial, and there's eyewitnesses begging to speak, and they're barred.
Right. And of course, we're talking about the most important one, which would have been John Bolton. But then these same senators, a few days later, vote to acquit him. And there's a good piece, I don't know if you read Sherrod Brown's column in the New York Times.
I
But,
didn't. But
he says that it was abject fear was the reason they voted that way. They feared rapprochement from Donald Trump. And that's why they did it. And the only one with enough courage, who'd have thought 4 years ago that we would have been praising the actions of Mittens? Mitt Romney.
Yeah, and there could be. I mean, Lindsey Graham, granted, he was afraid, but he also kept calling Trump Big Daddy. I'm with you. Okay, maybe not, but it sure seemed they had an S&M type relationship. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
you hate to use the B word, but, Trump turned the Republican U.S. senators into his bitches. I mean,
That's exactly what Sherrod Brown's point was, that it was strictly fear. And as it turns out...
well, that's how the Mac Daddy works.
And that turns out that they were right, or they might have gotten into his prayer breakfast speech had they done otherwise.
Oh, they wouldn't have been able to hang out with the cool bully.
Well, I thought I was watching Marlon Brando doling out punishment to the family for not doing things his way. And I'm obviously referencing The Godfather. That's what it was like.
Yeah. And, Rush Limbaugh kind of looked a little like The Godfather. I'm still stunned, right? Because if you go back over time, this is the man that said it was okay, for security guards to profile Oprah Winfrey because she's, quote, fat. And probably wasn't dressed right.
Well, one
This is
time...
the man who, remember Donovan McNabb?
Mm-hmm.
Suggested that, because he was black, he wasn't quite smart enough and was getting too much credit for. And he called the NBA, said it looked like the Crips and the Bloods.
Oh, yes. Too many of Rush's remarks I have lost over time. Just because there was a time when I would listen to him just to hear what he was saying, but it got to the point where it was so aggravating to hear what he was saying that I would just have to turn it off. The same with, every now and then I'll flip over to Fox News, like today after things were going down, I flipped it over to Fox News just to see how they're spinning it. But I can't watch it for very long just because it's so against everything I believe that I just can't stand it anymore.
But you can listen to broadcasting live on the air in Columbus, Ohio, The Other Side of the News in WGRN, the Green Renaissance. The Other Side of the News is at 5:30. That's 94.1 FM. Also, WCRS, your community radio, Monday at 4:30, The Other Side of the News plays. And if you got the old analog, 92.7 and 98.3. And we're also streaming live so they can see us on video, Michael Alwood. Again, top of the page, www.wgrn.org. So watch past episodes as well, on demand at YouTube. Just search WGRN.org 94.1 FM on the Free Press Network, and you'll find Michael Alwood on a few of those shows.
All right. Well, speaking of Rush Limbaugh, who had his own little problem with drugs in the past.
And with Viagra. Hi,
yes.
I'm a good God-fearing married man, and I'm sneaking into the Bahamas with...
And I don't know if you saw remarks from Nancy Pelosi today, who commented on the snubbed handshake that he looked a little sedated. And while I was looking around, there was a comedian, and I wish I could remember his name now, a comedian who once worked on Celebrity Apprentice. He's worked there for 6 seasons. And what his job was, this comedian, was to take care of the Trumps. And he said that Donald was a frequent user of amphetamines, which he would crush up his pills and snort them.
The next thing you can tell me is Tan's fake.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, the Michael Bloomberg commercials talk about somebody not taking any of, Trump's attacks. It's like, hi, Trump's a liar. He lies about his obesity. He lies about his tan. He lies about his hair. I mean, Michael Bloomberg, and that was after, of course, Trump did lie about him and claim he was negotiating to get a box to stand on for the debates.
Oh.
Which wasn't true, but as Mussolini-style lies go, that was you want something plausible, so.
Again, back to the breakfast speech, the way that he talked about Nancy Pelosi, and he didn't mention Mitt Romney by name, but he sure let him have it, saying that he knew that he voted the wrong way, and it was wrong what he did, and he knows it. Implying, I suppose, that he was doing this for his own Mitt Romney, was doing what he did for his own political interest. And I don't see that at all. Again, in the past, I would have never imagined sticking up for Mitt Romney, but I have to. I think he is one Republican who acted honorably during this whole charade that became a charade after those same senators voted to not allow the witnesses or documents into an important trial.
No, absolutely absurd to have a trial without witnesses. But let's go into the Iowa caucus debacle. How's the mainstream media been doing there? What's the real story, Michael Alwood?
Well, there's an interesting thing that popped up today, and I'm looking at this from the Gray Zone webpage, and I'll just give you the headline. Billionaire pro-Israel Buttigieg backer Seth Klarman funds group behind Iowa's disastrous voting app.
Yeah, a lot of interesting questions there, Mike. For example, this was done by a group, again called Shadow. And I'm thinking, who names a group Shadow? Yeah. Only the shadow knows. And it was paid for by Acronym, a super fund with ties to, Hillary Clinton and Obama's campaign and presidency as well. And why, with perhaps the most important election in the world this year, the kickoff of the primary caucus season for Democrat Democratic presidential nominees. Why? Why would you test your sort of beta app
Well, you know,
at that time?
Bob, if there's anybody who can speak to the subject of tabulation, manipulation, and flips, and all these troubling glitches in the system, it's you, because you've been studying it.
I thought I was a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, that's what they say, but I haven't seen you in a foil hat in years. Now, you know more about it than anybody on the planet, having studied it for as long as you have, 20 years or more that you've been looking at this, and not just the electronic aspect of it, but about the voting process in general.
Yeah, how it's easily gained. For example, okay, hypothetical here. Also, I should point out, 1,711 precincts could have been called in, but not only did the app go down, but the phone system went down as well. Now, one of the surprisingly candid takes was Chuck Todd, who on NBC, when he's analyzing it, saying the one person who's benefiting is Joe Biden, because it's taking away, because he was supposed to be winning in Iowa, or at least close to Sanders. Instead, he finished in 4th place. And the axiom is, unless you finished in the top 3, you got to get your butt out of the race. So in that scenario, you know, and again, to quote The Godfather, which we referenced earlier, I don't believe in coincidences. How likely is it that the app goes down and the backup phone system, which is no big deal, it's only 1,700 calls.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
were saying that a lot of the people were still trying to do it the old way, the way they'd always done it, by phoning it in.
I was getting reports, watching them from local people here who are in, and they were saying, look, we called out and talked to you know, one of our Sanders reps, you know, at the caucus, and he says been on the phone for 3 hours,
Right.
just on hold. So, you know, what's the likelihood not only the app goes down, but the phone system goes down, and the person who benefits is Buttigieg, ends up benefiting the most, and the centrist, the moderate, Biden, is saved to fight another day. And who is the one that they steal the headline from? Bernie Sanders, who's hated by the DNC.
What just goes to show that you can't trust any of them. But just because these are Democrats we're talking about, they are sure looking, at least it appears that some of this funny stuff, it's kind of Rovian.
Yeah.
In a way.
It is. They learned from the master, and Harvey Wasserman and I, who wrote What Happened in Ohio, documented history of theft and fraud. As we like to say, we didn't intend it to be a how-to manual.
Right.
Because really we caught the essence of Bush's brain, a.k.a. Karl Rove.
Are you concerned about the integrity of the upcoming presidential election? Ohio already has a history of election manipulation and tampering. And after what happened in Iowa, can we trust the results in Ohio's elections to be accurate? We must all be vigilant to ensure our votes are counted. Saturday, February 15th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., the Free Press and TrustVote.org will share their report on Ohio's voting equipment to highlight the potential for tampering at our polls this primary election. This event is free and open to the public, so join election security experts, advocates, and activists to learn how to protect your vote. Again, that's Saturday, February 15th from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Vanderelli Room in Franklinton. Hosted by Dr. Bob Fitrakis and featuring speaker Wade Rathke, Chief Organizer of Acorn International.
If integrity of our elections is important to you, check out www.trustvote.org, where I serve on the board. And also follow our friend John Brakey and his election scrutineers at Audit USA. That's Trust Vote and Audit USA. We have links to both in our show's description below. So there's good groups out there. And again, here in Ohio, I don't know if you know this, but we got 13 different voting systems, according to the Secretary of State. And Lake County has its own, where Trump won unexpectedly by 15 points. It was supposed to be a toss-up in Lake County, and they used the iVotetronic, which we refer to affectionately as Flipper. It's so famous
Flipper.
for what I like about Flipper is it's honest. It flips right in front of you.
Yeah.
A lot of these other ones, you wonder if it's flipping. The iVotetronic, it's like my vote just flipped.
I just wanted to point out to the listeners and viewers that if you want to get more in depth with what we're talking about right now, I urge you to pick up the February Free Press, because there's a lot of information. If you get to sit down and have it in front of you, you can start to understand. It's a very well written article, and you can see the kind of things that Bob has just been talking about and be more specific. And I believe you also have something else for them.
Yeah. To all those that have been supporting us at Patreon, thank you. And I'm going to give a copy of the book, The Strip and Flip Disaster of America's 2016 Election, 5 Jim Crows and the Electronic Election Theft. This one goes out to my good friend, Michael Kokonis. But if you get a chance, it documents all sorts of evidence. Apparently, Michael, you can program computers to get the results you want.
Yeah, and I remember the famous incident with, what was W's nickname for Karl Rove? Turd Blossom?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Turd Blossom.
And his famous meltdown when the flip didn't occur in Ohio. You remember that, I'm sure?
Yes, the 2012. In fact, there's a video on the internet called Nixing the Fix. Washington Spectator said because I had sued, remember, revealed that there were secret experimental patches
yes.
they had put on without telling anyone. And God bless the woman who worked in the Secretary of State's office who leaked the contract and the secret patches. Good God-fearing Republican. Probably wouldn't be welcome at Trump's prayer breakfast.
Probably not. And I want to add that the good people of Ohio have you to thank for some tireless effort in safeguarding the vote in many different ways, including challenging that patch, that getting around, circumventing the law by making it experimental. Otherwise, had it just been a patch, they weren't doing it within a time frame that was legal. I think they...
It was too close to the election.
It was way too close to the election. It was, they were supposed to be at least a year, I believe, before the
Prior,
election.
yeah, the year prior.
And this was doing it mere days before the election.
And it was doing it in, I was supposed to be doing it in one precinct in one county.
They
It
were
was,
doing
it
it.
was doing it in every major urban Democratic county. So again, Michael, I want to laud you as the longtime managing editor of the Free Press. And again, anything you'd like to say about this issue? A lot of good stuff in here.
Absolutely. I mean, besides your excellent work on the flipper, I love that. We have all kinds of things in here that will be of interest to everybody, especially about local politics. Mayor Andrew Ginther and his actions at the MLK breakfast, for example, that is an eye-opener of a story.
Wait, the white mayor has 2 black activists arrested
yes.
who were engaging in civil disobedience a la Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I'm amazed. You know,
And I
not only let the police rough them up, but you actually arrested them as opposed to remove them.
But I think the irony escapes Ginther altogether, that this should happen at a Martin Luther King breakfast, that you have civilly disobedient activists tossed out of an MLK breakfast. It's just
Yeah, how
absurd.
do you miss that one?
It's just absurd.
Yeah, and of course, I had a case prior to that, which I think you may remember, Michael, which involved Barry Etney, who called then Mayor Michael Coleman on Martin Luther King Day, Uncle Tom, from the audience at the King Lincoln Theater with all these guests there that Michael had brought in, including from other countries. to Michael's credit, he allegedly threatened to kick Barry's ass afterwards. And they charged Barry, the security guard there, issued a report. So I took over Barry's case. Everyone was telling Barry to plead guilty. I said, no. Let's subpoena the mayor and bring him in and put him under oath and say, did you threaten to kick his ass? But shockingly, when I suggested we do that, they dropped the case.
Oh,
But again, who knows? It might have helped his popularity.
I just wonder if anybody thought to break into song with Barack the Magic Negro.
Which is another, to clarify, which is a song by Rush Limbaugh.
It wasn't by Rush Limbaugh. It was one of his contributors.
Oh, it was one of his
who did- yeah,
contributors.
who did it, but he damn sure played the song.
All the time.
Yeah, on the radio.
But he also would do mocking what he called his Negro dialect for Al Sharpton.
Oh, yes.
It
Yeah.
was just like a scene out of Do the Right Thing.
And by the way, the Barack song was sung to the tune of Puff the Magic Dragon.
Magic Dragon.
Yeah.
And to think, Rush Limbaugh, who often was called, the most listened to radio talk show host, but in some areas they put him on 4 or 8 channels, and he was number one on none of them. They would have to aggravate because of Bill Clinton's horrendous mistake.
Not aggravate. That was a Freudian slip. You said aggravate, which is what Rush does, and what you meant was aggregate.
Aggregate. Yeah, absolutely right. That was very Freudian. But
Because it's hard to even think about Rush Limbaugh without being
aggravated, yes. So last minute, Michael, what would you like to tell our listeners?
Go out and pick up a copy of the Free Press. Please patronize our advertisers. And if you have any contributions of your own to make, we're always happy to look over submissions. And a lot of times we will use them, especially if they're well written and poignant.
And again, I would argue, nice layout on the, that tells you all the voting systems in Ohio. And make sure you check to see if you're registered to vote. You might think you're registered to vote, but there's a strange way in Ohio of algorithms throwing you off the ballot, particularly if you're a progressive Democrat. That's it, Michael. We're out of here. Thanks for being on the other side of the news.
Anytime, my friend.
Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.